Hello, welcome to this video. And this video is going to be called, Did the CD Save or Destroy Music? And I actually don't know. And I'll tell you what's inspired this video is that, as you can see, my room has been cleared. And if you look here, you can see my stereo system and you can see some vinyl records there. And I have got, you can't quite see, but there's some boxes there. And I've bought some cabinets, nice display cabinets for my vinyl. And one of my plans is I'm going to actually alphabetize my vinyl and I'm going to go through, and as I do this, I'm going to be creating some videos where I'm going to look at the A's basically, and then I'm going to look at the B's. I'm going to talk about the albums. And a lot of the albums I've got, they've all got stories attached to them. It's not just straight that I went and bought the album. There's all sorts of stories behind some of these albums. Who's given it to me, where I found it, what I sold to get it, you know, who I swapped it with to get these albums. Because this is going on all the time, and it's a very interesting fact that my albums are the one things that have stayed with me for the last 45 years. I've never chucked them, I've never junked them, I've never decided to move on. You know, I had a collection of video cassettes, you know, of films, because I'm such a big film fan. And when the DVDs came out, I basically bagged them all up because they were taking a whole... I had a big cellar at that point, and they were just basically all the way around the walls because, you know, the VHS tapes like that big. It's not like an album. And there must have been a good nearly 1,000, and I ended up just bagging them up and taking them down the tip, and they went. Now, when CDs came in, for some reason, I didn't do that with the vinyl, thank God. I wonder how many people did, because we all thought that the CD, we all thought that this thing here was going to replace it, didn't we? And what have we got here? This was one of the biggest selling albums of the 1980s. There we've got it, coming out in 1985. And this album, it was capitalising on this new thing that was happening in the 1980s. 1985 was the key year when the CD really starts to take over from the vinyl. And we had all that sort of digital sound that's... Phil Collins really gets into on this album, doesn't he? Sussudio opens up that. And of course, that sound with all that, you know, all that treble and the big boomy basses, the CDs could replicate better than the vinyl. And everyone would go home and they go, listen to my CD player. And they stick this on and everyone would be astonished at what Phil was doing there. So it could have been very easy to chuck them all away. But as time's gone on, the vinyl's lifted up. And when you go to a record fair, you might find the odd store with a bit of few CDs in the corner, but everyone's after the vinyl. Now, I am going to bring my vinyl collection over here because I'm missing it now I'm here. I realised the other day, I like to be sat in front of my records. That's why this channel exists. It's them that you should be, you know, it's them that should get the credit, not me. It's my record collection. And... so often in the old days, I'd walk in and have a peruse and I'd see something and it would trigger off, and I haven't got that anymore. But I've got as many CDs. Now, I've probably lost as many CDs as albums over the years. But for me, I don't listen to vinyl. I'll get my turntable sorted out. But my main listing place for music is in my car. And I have a CD player in my car. Now, you could say, oh, Andy, you're so out of date. Why don't you just get Spotify on your phone? You can run Spotify like everyone else. All my friends have got that. Right, I cannot listen to streaming sites. I use them in researching this. I'm lying in bed and go, well, let's see. It's just there, the album's there. But the problem is, I've got ADHD, although I've never been diagnosed with it, but I'm pretty sure I've got ADHD. If I go onto Spotify... Like the other night, I thought, oh, let's go put some music on. Just put some music. I'm lying there. I got a new little speaker right next to the bed. And I thought, I'll put something nice on. I thought, put some Keith Jarrett on. So I go to Keith Jarrett. Because that is what, if my choice, if you want to know what my actual choice would be at any moment in time, it will be Keith Jarrett or somebody like that. So I thought, so I get there. Now I've got all the Keith Jarrett albums to pick from. So I pick one. It's a solo concert one. And then I'm lying there, I thought, oh, I think I'd rather listen to the trio. So I put a trio album on, and that nearly captures my interest. But I'm thinking about all the other Keith Jarrett albums that I've not heard for ages. And I start thinking, what about that one you used to have that you've lost? Would you want to have a listen to that one? I guess I'll put that on. And before I know it, I'm now not focusing on that album. And then I start to think, oh, well, there's a Pat Metheny album I wanted to listen to. And I can't settle. My ADH brain cannot settle. Whereas when I've got a CD, I stick it in the car and I'm driving around. I don't want to stop the car and go through. I've only got about 4 CDs in there anyway. And so that album sticks there. Now, vinyl used to do that for me even more. I mean, it was like, you know, as soon as the CD came out, and do you remember in the old days you could memorise them and put them in a certain order? My ADHD and OCD, I think they're both, I would have been there going, well, let's reorder the album, memories, like, and all this stuff. Nobody does that anymore. Now, for me, the CD is more portable. From a basic level, it sounds better than an album. What I mean by that is if you've got an incredible setup, incredible speakers, incredible amp, a really good turntable in a good room, the vinyl has a warmth and beauty. We all can go on about how great that is. But the idea that I could play a vinyl record in my car and get that sort of quality, you wouldn't. And if I am listening to Spotify, it just sounds a little bit compressed, and MP3s don't quite sound like a CD. So a CD is really good. And I think if you really wanted to test the system out, CDs sound amazing. It's a really good way of having music. So I like the CD. Now, the other day, I had a rehearsal with Tim Bonus. Now, Tim Bonus, as well as being a prog rock legend and one half of No Man, also is the guy behind the music distributor Burning Shed. So he brought me some CDs up to peruse. And I'm going to go through them now. So I've got all these to listen. Now, I can listen to these because I will stick them on in the car. And so, although he gave me some vinyl, and I'm very excited about that, but I'm excited about that because I can stick it into my record collection and not feel all proud I've got some new vinyl in there. And I might go down and put a record on, and I might sit and listen to it, maybe have a cup of tea. And I like that. That was what I used to do 40 years ago, but I don't ever seem to really have the chance to do that. But these, when I woke up the next day, I thought, oh, I've got those CDs. So I could go and check out Justin Hayward. I love Justin Hayward's voice. And this is someone I've never listened to the Moody Blues. He was friends with my father-in-law, you know. He was a big fan of my father-in-law who was a singer. So I'm just going to go through some of these. Here I've got some minimalist modelling classical music with Michael Talk to have a listen to. Oh, look at this. The Drift by Scott Walker. Scott Walker is somebody I need to get into. Of course, the Tilt was an incredible change in style for him as he went from sort of operatic pop star in the 1960s with the Walker Brothers to being a sort of pioneer electronic type persons. Little Feat. I like Little Feat. I love Richie Hayward's drumming. See, there's so much music out there that I need to explore. Now, I have also been loaned this. This has specifically been given to me by Tim Bonus. Van Morrison, no guru, no method, no teacher. So, when did this come? This is 1980s, isn't it? 1986, the worst year for music. But Tim's given me that. And I'm going, and he said it's like an 80s version of Astral Weeks, which really is basically the worst thing that could ever exist. But I am going to stick it in the car and I'm going to react to it and tell you what I think. And I might like it. I might change. Now, here's another thing, all right? This is one of my CDs. AC/DC Let There Be Rock, okay? I've got all AC/DC on vinyl. This album I bought 40 years ago, right? I've got it on vinyl. It's the copy that, I know it is, I lost it, and then I've had to buy another copy of it on vinyl, and that's the one I've now got. This one is what I will actually listen to if I want to listen to Let There Be Rock. So the CD has a certain place. Tim's also brought me this up. British jazz rock classic. I saw this on vinyl at a record fair. It was 150 quid. I know you like this. Shall we just have a quick zap through and see if there's anything that you lot would like here? I've got quite a lot here. Let's have a look what we've got. Oh, see, that's a full album. That's the sort of stuff I like now. That's what I really listen to. This is what I really listen to nowadays. Sun Ra, this is my thing. And of course, AC/DC. What else have we got here? What's that? That's some sample of some esoteric record label. Led Zeppelin. That's on my listing of that from the aforementioned video. Tim's passed on a lot of Steve Reich that I'm going to be listening to. I mean, look at that look at that. It's got a book in it and everything. Incredible. The maximalist stuff of Steve Reich is some of my most favourite music on the planet. Really is. I'm just going to zip up the brightness here because the sun's gone out. I don't want to be thrown into darkness. Here's the thing that happens with CDs. See that one there? I bought that as my Marvin Gaye album because I do like Marvin Gaye. And then at some point, probably splitting up with someone, they've got into my record collection and they're not interested in Frank Zappa and the Mavish Structure, but they thought that and they've taken it. And now I've got it back, you see? That's called karma. Whoa, that's the sort of thing I like. Although Eberhard Weber, I'm actually not that familiar with it. Colours of Chloe being one of the great jazz albums of the 1970s. But I like the idea that we've got John Marshall on here, the late great drummer from Soft Machine. I'll nearly get him, and then I'm going to tell you my appraisal of oh, look! I mean, look at this. This is Steve Reich early works. Tim's passed this on to me. I absolutely love Steve Reich, but here I might do a video on this album because we have got Piano Phase from 67, It's Gonna Rain from 65, which is possibly when he sort of invents his version of minimalism. We've got Clapping Music from 1972 and Come Out from 1966. I might do something on this album because Steve Reich, I think it's difficult music, but I found if I could capture my students and stick on Piano Phase, it had a profound effect on them, always. But the trouble is you have to sit down and listen to it. And that's the theme, isn't it, here, is that to appreciate music, you've got to sit down and listen to it and focus on it. I know how to focus on music. And then when I was learning to play instruments, guitar, drums, bass and stuff like that, you have to really then focus. You know, what's the notes, what they're playing? And you're trying to work out what's going on. And that focus, that intensity, I can turn on. But as an adult, often I can't actually get the time. And I do suffer with this sort of flibbity-gibbity thing. You know, you can tell that watching it. Watching the videos, I'm all over the place. So, I like CDs. Okay? And I keep saying that there's going to be a point, right, when people start wanting to collect CDs. But why would they want to collect CDs when you've got Spotify? So why do people want to collect vinyl when you've got Spotify? It's because there's a romance around the vinyl, isn't there? So let's track it back, shall we? In the 1970s, something happened that changed music. Rather than people having some little dance-it player that they would play singles on in their bedroom with one speaker, stereo came out. Now, stereo was a very important cultural phenomenon in the 1960s and especially the 1970s. At that time, we had the radio, and most people's radios was a tiny little thing in the corner of the room. Or you had television, the television was a tiny little thing in the corner of the room. Or you could read a book, perhaps, or have a game of chess. But when hi-fis, stereo hi-fis were introduced, and people went and bought those and set them up in their house, they then wanted the experience. And I can remember when my dad bought a hi-fi in around about 71, 72, people would come round to see them, their friends, and my dad would go, listen to this, you won't believe this. And he would put it on and people would stare in disbelief as they could hear stuff that seemed to be coming from everywhere, all around the room. Whoa, oh my God, what's this? And of course, experimental rock and rollers embraced this. And suddenly, avant-garde electronic music, progressive rock music, free jazz, experimental music, all these things combined to feed that experience. And so the reason why Dark Side of the Moon is one of the most famous, biggest albums in the whole world, which we listen to now, we can hear its greatness. But the reason it sold in 73 was because of that three-dimensional Zuccarelli's holophonic section when the alarm clocks go off. And people would stare in disbelief, but to really have that experience, you had to make sure that you had a good copy of the vinyl, no surface noise, that your amp was clear and precise, and that your speakers could handle the upper end. And so we all started to talk about tweeters, didn't we? And most speakers on hi-fi had 2 speakers in there, like a woofer and tweeter. But then you get some with 3 ways. We were all really interested in this. Then people started to pull the grills off. So when you went around someone else, you could see whether they got those 3 speakers and how it worked. So then people started talking about quadraphonic, and all these things started to happen. And all the way through this, it starts to create a want for this super high quality, which can basically be translated to very high fidelity treble. Now, treble, the waveforms are happening very, very quickly. Bass, the waveforms are happening slowly. To get a lot of bass, you need a big speaker pushing a lot of air, right? But to get the fidelity, to get right up here, you need speakers that are able to act fast and really get into the detail of that. The whole system, you know, from the wiring to the amplifier, you know, through to the speaker, this starts to get fetishized. Everybody wants gold connections. You can't plug it all in when you got to screw it all in. And then all this stuff becomes the trappings. It becomes fetishized. And everybody wants to have that system that's cost them thousands. So when their friends come around, they can put War of the Worlds on, or Tubular Bells, or Close to the Edge, or whatever it is, and impress their friends with this experience, which is almost cinematic. You could tell stories. I really believe the greatest album ever made. I'm starting to think this. In terms of the album, the greatest album ever made is a progressive rock album, and it's War of the Worlds by Jeff Wayne. It's just the ultimate album. If you were to buy a hi-fi to play records, vinyl records, and you were only going to have one album that you could play on that, you could go for Dark Side of the Moon. That would be a runner-up without a doubt. But I'd go for War of the Worlds, because Dark Side of the Moon's not got Richard Burton on it. And Burton just pushes it right out front for me. No one would believe that, but it's true. So, I mean, put a bit of space in there to see if anyone just got that bit. And if you did, you could be clever, can't you? In the comments of this video. So we enter the 1980s. Now, the thing is, I can remember around about 1983, I'd been in the Santana's Abraxas. And I really was into it. And then I wanted to put something else on, probably. I think it was Santana Welcome. I was in a Santana vein. So I put the album, stuck it on the side of the windowsill and put Welcome on. And I sat back and listened to Welcome. And then I looked round at my Abraxas album, and it had all gone wavy because the sun had come in and warped it all over the place. And I remember someone saying that if you were to get some hot water, it would make the plastic all go wobbly, and then you could put a pencil in there and spin it, and the centrifugal force would flatten it out. Well, I can tell you now, that's not true. And I tried it, and it just sort of span out, and then all flopped down and went solid. So now it looked like some sort of black little Batman cape all folding down. So then I thought, well, I'll melt it again, and I'll put it between 2 pieces of wood and try and squodge it. So I heated it so it was all floppy, put it in, put the wood, and I stood on it. And then when I got up, it had gone from being a 12-inch record to a 12.5-inch record. Not quite, and the grooves had all flattened out, and it was ruined. I was upset because I think with vinyl, they're delicate, aren't they? You know, the amount of times I've been dancing around my room and knocked something over, it's fell on the record. Now, my turntable's defunct. The one I've got here behind me is defunct. I've just had to get a new stylus. If you go back, you will find a video of Brummy Dave, I think it is, when he was first on. He goes for a mooch around my studio. And because he's a clumsy man, he's being all clumsy. I actually genuinely broke my turntable at that point. And that's it, it's been out of action. I've had to go and buy a stylus for it. And I've had to click it all in and do all that, you know. And so vinyl records were delicate. When these things came out, you know, when we finally got these coming out, right? The main seller of this is that you could put jam on them. Do you remember? Could put jam on one of these. Oh, brilliant. I've been spreading jam across my vinyl record, just Wrexham, and I'm thinking, you know, when are they going to be able to bring some sort of music medium out where I can spread jam on it? But the point is that these are indestructible. You can do all that to it. And now I know you go, don't do that, it'll wreck them, because they weren't quite as robust as we thought, were they? But the big thing is, I can remember up in Birmingham, there was a shop called Richer Sounds. Anyone around in Birmingham will remember it. I think it's still going. I think they've come back out again. And they had like sort of separate stereo stuff. Very reasonable, very reasonable. You could go and buy a CD player for quite a reasonable price. When they first came out, I can remember going and buying a Sony CD player, and it was literally about 120 quid, which is like 250 quid. And I want to show you something. Have a look at this. I've always liked Sony. So, my very long-winded point here that I'm sort of really enjoying telling you about. I'm enjoying this video because there's so much in here I haven't spoken about, and it's so much truth, right? So, the point is here, when I decide to redo all my vinyl, I also decided to do all my CDs. And the fact is, I've got more excited about the CDs. And the reason is because they do sound amazing, because I've got so many of them. I'm really excited about trying to find them all, bringing them all back, seeing what I've got, having a little. But you have to sit down. More than the vinyl, I don't know why. I haven't got a CD player. Now, back in 1984, when I first bought a CD player, I had to go to Mum and Dad for a birthday present, really save up. He had to put a load of them. And we bought this CD player, and it was like nobody else I knew really had one. And we also went up to Richard Sounds, and I bought an amp. And I bought some speakers. Now, they were only cheap, but when we set it up at home, it was jaw-dropping, the sound. And the first CD I ever bought was, I bought two. It was Sting's Dream of the Blue Turtle, so that's 85. And it was Star People by Miles Davis. And I bought Star People because you couldn't get it on vinyl. This was a major deal. Now, me thinking the other day, I thought, I'm going to get a CD player. Now, I've got an old CD player somewhere, but I thought, I wish I could get a Sony CD player like I had before. And I was thinking about this. And I went down to this place where I got my stylus. I said, have you got any CD players? And he went, nah, you'll never get one of those, you know, maybe a specialist. I thought, this is weird. Can you not buy CD players? What happens if you want to listen to a CD? I thought, this is going to be a bit of a problem, or a Sony CD player. Anyway, in moving studio, I went up the tip. And sat on the tip was this. Sat in the tip was this. Now, I haven't actually managed... I've plugged it in and it's playing CDs. I don't know whether it works or not. But this isn't just a Sony CD player. This is a Sony 5-disc CD player. Look at it. Someone had dumped this in the tip. They dumped it in the tip. What is going on? What sort of madness has taken over human beings for this to be going on? What's going on? Now, I've got a good system behind me there. Arkham amp, although I think that I might have knackered that. But I've got 3 amps. I've got 2 other Rotel amps as well. I've got those quite large Tannoy speakers. That's all really good stuff there. And when I get the turntable up and going, I've got a Technics 1200, you know, Mark II, which is the one everybody wants. So I've got that as well. If you're a D-Date scratch, you could have scratched stuff on that, you know. So where am I? This could be great to put the vinyl on, but I know if a layperson came in here and they want to say, can you play us your stereo, see what it sounds like? I'm not going for a vinyl record. I'm going to be going for a CD. That's what I'm looking forward to. Because the CD kicks you in the face. It's got more bass. It's a subtle experience, and I appreciate them both. I'm quite excited to go back to CDs. I don't like listening to stream stuff. I hate it. I just don't want to listen to it. I never liked it. When the iPod came out, right, I think I bought an iPod. I spent a whole bunch of time transferring all my CDs. So I had this huge collection. And then the torrent files came out. And suddenly we were all like going, you could just download the whole catalogue of a whole band. And well, check out Kraftwerk. Whole catalogue on. I never listened to them. And that is when I noticed that I was clicking past. I'd put it on shuffle. put it on the car, and I was on tour a lot then, so I'd have it in the headphones, and I used to lie on the tour bus, put it on, and start playing the old iPod, and I go, I don't like that one, click pass. Oh, this is a weird jazz thing, click pass. And I would go, it was like it was making my taste worse as I lowered and lowered down. If someone didn't kick in straight away, I wasn't interested in it. And this is the forerunner of what we have now in this TikTok music generation. When I had a Sony CD Walkman with headphones, I had the one CD, so I'd get a CD I really like, I'd put it on, and I'd listen to it, and then I'd pick one I wasn't so keen on, and it was in the machine, I would carry on listening to it, and then I would get a greater depth out of it, you know. So I am championing CDs here. I think I like CDs. I want CDs to come back. And the other thing I like about CDs is that you can sell them. So if there was a cultural change where people like me went, I know Spotify's there, but that's just a taste stuff. Nobody wants to sit and listen to an album on Spotify. I want to go back to CDs. It's never going to happen, but say that did happen. The music industry would suddenly, it'd dust itself off and stand and go, right, come on then, we're back in business. Right? And a CD, unlike vinyl, I mean, you could theoretically make a CD yourself if you've got a few sticky labels and a bit of a printer, you know, some blank CDs. That was a wonderful period when you could write your own CDs and make an album. And you'd have to think about the limits of the CD, which everyone's still doing. I'm basically saying CDs are a good thing, right? I think we need to treasure our CDs. And if we all start championing them. Now, the other thing is as time goes on, I'm starting to notice that certain artists are definitely falling down the cracks. And you are starting to get to a situation where the only way of listening to certain music, especially when you get right to the back end of certain things, would to find the vinyl version of it or CD version of it. As time goes on, that will only get more and more profound a thing, that we are losing artists, without a doubt. And I wonder whether there's going to be a certain point with all the sort of online storage places like YouTube and Spotify. What happens when you've been around for 100 years? Do you just store everything, or do you archive it? What happens? You know, I'm pretty sure there'll be digital archaeologists at some point in the future. So, what I mean by this is that over the last 20 years, I've been in so many bands where they weren't signed, but they had a following and they made an album. And that album was bought by people, but it never quite got to be stored onto Spotify. My first album I ever made was called, it was called Kunderbuffer. And I made it myself, and I printed up 5 copies on CD. I wrote them, and I'm the only person who's got a copy of that. And I haven't even put that up on my Bandcamp. It's never been put out because it's a bit rubbish, you know. I might do it one day. My second album I made was when I was doing drum clinics, and this was where I had an audience, and I made an album called The Twitch. And that, again, I got a company to press up 100 copies. I went out on tour, and I sold those pretty quickly, generating £1,000. We got some more press, and I think I sold about 200 or 300 more. So that album actually made a profit for me. In fact, over £1,000, it made probably the most profit I ever have off an album, because it was mine and I sold it direct at gigs. Then I thought, I'm going to make another album, because I was into the business of making albums. And I made an album called The Great Game. Now, this is really interesting. It had a picture, like a child's pencil drawing or a teenager's pencil drawing of this guy at a desk, and it had all this stuff swirling back. It's called The Great Game. It's expanded the sound out. The Twitch, my second album, was very drum orientated, very zappery, very muso. This one had a touch of that, but it was much more about groove and funk. It got rappers on it, singers on it, right? And I went again, pressed up 100 copies, went out on tour, sold them all, made some money, gave a lot away, and then at some point down the line, I remember thinking, oh, that album, Great Game, and I went looking for it. I couldn't find it. I have lost that album. I can't remember what's on it now. I haven't heard it for over 25 years. I don't know what's on there. Now, there might be somebody out there who's got a copy of The Great Game because they came to see me at a drum clinic and they bought a copy of that album. If they have to get in touch, because I would love to hear it, but it's lost. And I'm assuming that most people who bought it 25 years ago, with the way CDs have gone, that most people have probably chucked their CDs at some point. So I imagine it's gone, especially something like that. So we're losing things like that. Not that it matters, but it matters to me. Now, let's skedaddle back to that 1985 period when I bought my CD player. The music industry was flying high at that moment. In 1982, Michael Jackson's Thriller had come out and had sold something like 30 or 40 million records. The record industry was getting better at producing blockbuster albums like that. This was creating like hundreds of millions of dollars, you know, incredible money-making thing. Time had moved on. The post-punk, post-disco age was moving towards hip-hop and rap. You'd got dance music coming in. Pop music was taking over in the 1980s. And the 70s bands like Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Yes seemed like they were really out of date. They tried their best to try and get into the 1980s. Genesis managed to do it. Yes managed to do it with one album. But people were struggling. And those bands who were making albums that seemed all a little bit out of date. Then the CD came out. The record companies were going, right, so we're going to put out a version of Dark Side of the Moon on CD. Now, Bill Laswell, who was the famous producer, the way he got into the industry is in the mid-70s, early 80s, he was working for a company that was putting less well-known bands on to CD. And he tells a story of literally the record company would go, have you got a copy of that album? And you go, yeah, what's it like? It's a bit scratchy, but it's all right. And that would be the CD. In many cases, people went back to the original masters and just wound it off onto CD. But it was a different medium. And so he had, in the 1980s, a whole raft of albums coming out, which were basically just the digital copy of the original album. All those came out. So let's just take Dark Side of the Moon. Dark Side of the Moon, you bought it in 1973, and that's it. You've got your copy of it. And then in the 80s, of course, they go, we're going to release it again. So you go and buy that on CD, and you go and buy it on CD. And when you come home and put it on, it doesn't quite sound as good as a vinyl album. Do you remember? You know, and I can remember going and getting Where Have I Known You Before by Return to Forever on CD. I got that in 1985. I got the other three albums on vinyl. And I didn't like that album because it sounded so harsh on CD. And so I didn't listen to it that much. Now, when you look at people, they talked about Return to Forever, they'll say that's the greatest album. It probably is. It's like the sort of, in terms of velocity and sheer power, it's incredible. But to me, it was thin and tinny and the drum sounds didn't sound right. Now, it's because I bought it in that era and it ruined. Return to Forever has never, because for me it was a Romantic Warrior, but if I bought that on CD, I might have had the same thing. So you've bought your Dark Side of the Moon 1985 and you're aware it doesn't sound so good. And then you start reading, oh, that's why they need to remaster it. They need to remaster it for CD. And so then they're going to bring the remastered version out. So you buy it a third time, right? And then you're happy with that. Then a few years later, they go, well, we're going to bring it up. It's going to have an expanded version on it. We found a live concert they did of it, and there's a few alternative mixes. So they bring that out, and you go and buy that one. And then a few years later, we're going right up until now. A few years back, they decided to release the 400 quid version of this album. And as the market for vinyl has shrunk, the labels have been able to increase the cost. So people who are just still buying vinyl have got to fork out 400 quid. That is what the economy has done. So what CDs did was, through that period, I think they actually kept these bands going. So that if we look at the thing that happened before, singles, and you start to look at people who are putting singles out in the 1940s, 50s, early 60s, all those bands have been forgotten because there was never any want to put those out on CD singles. What you did get were people would buy those records out and then some little label would go best of 50s rock and roll or best of whatever, and you get these compilation comings out when nobody got any royalties for, and it was all badly done. So there's a whole history going on with the CD. But I think the CD rescued a lot of the music that we like. and got it through the 1980s because people were still buying it. So those artists were still around. As their success waned, the cost of making the album also went down. And so you can see there's a difference between getting a, say, who we're going to pick. Say if you bought an Al Di Meola album in 1976, that's a high production value. You've got string sections on it, you know, you've got Paco de Lucia flown in and all this type of thing. And once you get into the sort of early 90s, the whole thing's just come down a little bit, hasn't it? So what we're having now is that whole experience of those CDs coming out with all those different versions, now they've gone back to vinyl, and now you're getting the vinyl box set of Dark Side of the Moon, which is basically a copy of the CD one, although slightly different, and that's costing you 400 quid. And there's people on YouTube, I feel sorry for them, but their whole channel is basically they've got all the Pink Floyd versions of Dark Side of the Moon, all the versions of Wish You Were Here, and they're there to give you a review of that. I wish I could do that. You're never going to get that one of that from me, because I will never, ever buy one of those box sets. I have no interest in it whatsoever. I believe that the artists did what they did. They presented something which was their artistic statement, and the confines of that and the editing down of that to create that album is what makes it brilliant. Now shuffling through all the stuff that was put in the bin, it doesn't help in any shape or form, right? And I have never come across one of these albums where when they offer up the other stuff, it was worth it. If you know what I mean by that. So the CD of the 80s, up the production, up the quality sound, right? It saved those bands in the 70s, but it did something else as well. And the big negative shift with the CD was its portability. So now you could listen to an album, high quality, in a very enjoyable way inside your car. That is now my main place I listen to music. I have swapped having my bedroom as a teenager that was set up. I had my bed here, and then I had the two great big speakers and a stereo system, and then all my records here. And I would get home from school, go upstairs, practice my drums, and then once I'd finished practicing my drums, I would lie in the bed, I would put a record on, switch the light off, and sit there in that wonderful black space where everything was just music. That was my listening experience in the 1980s. Now, it is me shouting at someone in the traffic jam whilst in the background, cranked up to as loud as it possibly gets to get over all the noise and the heater in my car, which makes a noise, you know, some album. It's a worst experience, but that one is better than my kids walking around with an iPhone like this, listening to stuff off TikTok like that. Right? Or with their little cruddy headphones in, giving you some imagined idea of what the music should be like after a whole bunch of compression and a whole bunch of sort of AI interaction with the sound to make it sound big in your ears when it's not really there and all that type of stuff. So the listing has gone. This is one of the reasons why the music industry's gone. And people don't want it, and they've been trained out of it. Now, I could trace that back, as I said, to the CD Walkman, right? Or even the cassette, because we haven't mentioned cassettes in this at all. But the way the cassettes worked is that when the CD came out, you could go to school. You didn't have to take a record. You could stick that in your satchel. I had a satchel, see. And my mate said, "What you got?" And it would never be that. It would never be Steve Reich's 4 sections of music for mallets, instruments, voices, and organs. But I could say to my mate, you know, Barry, "Do you want to borrow that? What have you got?" And he'd go, "Oh, I've got it. Let's just grab something at random. I got Little Feat. Oh, brilliant." Right. Now, the fact is, if somebody came into school with a Little Feat CD like that, and I never heard of them, I'd still borrow it and stick it on tape, because anything to listen to was good at that point. And I'd go home and I would record the CD onto my cassette tape. And that recording was different to the vinyl onto a cassette tape, because when you did vinyl onto a cassette tape, it was a second generation. It still sounded cool, but you still heard the needle go on, and you tried to not put that on, so it sounded like it was a proper cassette tape. But when you got the CD, you know, you would be able to, if there's no turning it over, you've got your C90, 45 in, so you hit record, you're trying to guess that bit of plastic where you can't record on, is that passed? I'll give it a few seconds, I don't want to go on for too long, I've got to just start, down, press, start to play, walk away, turn the sound down, and it will go all the way through, it's never going to jump or skip, goes all the way to the end. And then, as GRP boasted on every CD that they put out, they put digital master. You owned a digital master. And so that cassette tape was the same quality as a cassette tape you could buy. CD knocked cassette tape out. Cassette tape was the portable one, right? But it knocked it out as a medium for buying music on. In the early 80s, it was perfectly acceptable to buy an album on cassette tape, wasn't it? Now, cassette tapes, again, I think they're wonderful. I would like to bring the cassette tape back. I think that we made a mistake in the industry believing or selling the idea, because it made money at the time, that this was somehow replacing the thing that went before. It wasn't replacing it. It was just coming along with something different. And then we all adjusted to that difference. So the CD put people listening out in music. So once you got your CD Walkman, now you got full digital music, right? You've got it there. You can run around with it, you know, and suddenly people are now listening to music in stranger places. And that starts to change your habits, right? Now, the idea that you're going to be pottering about doing something, house with a CD Walkman on, and you're listening to Dark Side of the Moon, that's not the sort of stuff that's going to work in that environment. And you can see the success of albums like Thriller and, you know, Purple Rain and those 80s albums where everything's just pulled in a little bit more. It's all much more about pop music. Of course, MTV comes in and changes all of that as well. And with MTV, the visual aspect of the band, which is so important. People don't understand how important the visual aspect is. In the 70s, Pink Floyd is the cover of Wish You Were Here. It's those blokes shaking hands and he's on fire. That is what Pink Floyd was. You didn't know what they looked like, you know. You might be able to buy an album and turn it over, but for a pop star, you'd buy that album and they would be on the front, wouldn't they? The big cover of them, you know, like that. And greatest hits of wherever. And they're there like that. That is the representation visual. When you get to CDs, these are worse. In terms of the artistic bit, this is rubbish. I mean, look at this. Let's just pull one out as random. As you can probably tell, I haven't planned this in terms of the way, you know, I always never plan it. So I just want to pull out an album I know. Let's do Let There Be Rock. Because I know this album inside out. I've got a lot of CDs. Right, so there we go. Right, now, that's okay. That's the cover. This is sort of similar, but it was never like this. And aesthetically, this is different, as is that horrible thing there. When I open it up, that's what you get. AC/DC has been reduced to this. It's horrendous. That's enough. That was enough. If you want more than that, you're going to have to spend after a lot of money for the Let There Be Rock box set. Then you'll get a little booklet inside. Not a book, a booklet. If you put a book inside an album, a 12-inch, that's like a coffee table book, isn't it? A book inside a CD is a booklet. But that didn't matter because the visual thing's now transferred to MTV. So the downside of CDs in the 1980s was it made music portable and it threw the visual aspect to somewhere else. And so, although the CDs were sort of all powerful in the 1980s, there was a certain aspect where they opened up this idea that you could go somewhere else to sort of perceive the band. It used to be that the only way that would happen was on a live gig, but now you can go somewhere else. And the digital quality of them, the potential for getting good quality copies, you know, basically pirate recordings, was enhanced by that. Of course, once the computers came along, if you wanted to transfer your vinyl onto the computer digitally, you had to get a special interface and then sit there in real time. But then suddenly the iPod comes out, doesn't it? And we're just shuffling these in. Bang. Grab. Brilliant. Right, it's got its little feet on. And I can remember sitting there watching telly with my laptop here, sticking CDs into it, then being uploaded. They know what the album is, grabbing the artwork, it appears on my iPod. I did that for hundreds of CDs. How many of them I actually listened to on that iPod, I don't know. I don't think I ever did. So the answer to the question of this video is, did the CD save or destroy music? The answer is, of course, yes and no, or both. That change in medium changed it in a certain way. The move to vinyl albums in the 50s and 60s sort of, we went from incredible singles acts like Little Richard and Elvis Presley to incredible album acts like Mike Oldfield and Pink Floyd. That's a big shift. I like that shift, but for people who like pop music, the movement to albums is a worse shift. You know, the move to cassettes, the move to CDs, again, positive and negatives. You know, it's a positive to have your music portable. You know, it's a positive to have something like a cassette or a CD where you can throw it around the room and it'll still play. Of course, the move to digital music online is it's such a big shift that we can pretty much say that the idea that the music business is the recorded music business, the record industry, as we used to call it, that has totally been destroyed. All that exists is a little cottage industry that you may as well do yourself. But I do think that CDs are, if push were to come, if push to shove, or whatever you're going to say, what you're ever going to call it. I love vinyl. I go out once a month and I go vinyl hunting and I buy it and I bring it back. Can't wait to have my vinyl, and it's so special to me. But if I was to say what's the best medium of owning and storing and listening to music, it is definitely not having online some Spotify playlist that you've created, you know, or your liked albums. It's definitely not that. The argument would be between vinyl and records, and at the start of this video I was just going, but records are still the best. I don't know whether they are. I don't know whether they are. CD might have been the peak. And that peak in record buying, which was in 2000, not in 1978, it's in 2000, was created by the CD. The CD exists in music history in a place where it actually occupies not this join between the vinyl album and online digital. It's actually the summation of it. It's the peak. CDs were the peak. Yeah, a brilliant system, a nice chair, and you get a good quality vinyl copy of a 70s album that was recorded and mixed to go on an album, and you can't beat that. That is the best. But as a rough and ready system for listening to very good, high quality music, it's CD. Every single time, it's CD. And I'm sure once I posit this here, there's going to be people in the chat below going, Andy's right, CDs do sound better. That we have to come to vinyl albums to think they sound better. There's a romance and an imagination that makes those sound better. But in terms of frequency, width, detail, fidelity, you know, the sort of the grain, it's a CD. It's a CD every time. So, have we thrown the baby out with the bathwater? And do we need to have a think about our CD collections? Well, I'm going to be pulling my CD collection together, so we're going to be going through that. And what you're going to see is all my vinyl was bought in the 1980s up until 1985. So it's all my formative records, which is why it's so important to me. But there's all the little excursions and interests that I've had that go on from then, which occupies nearly 40 years of my life. That happened on CD. By the time I got to the end of the 1980s, I'd stopped buying vinyl albums. I only bought vinyl albums for around about 10 years. But I bought CDs. Even now, I have gone back to buying CDs. This is what's really interesting. I bought a CD yesterday. It was the Crosby, Stills and Nash album. Be surprised you might think, because with my hatred of Americana, but I love that album. I just love it so much. And I thought, I'm going to get into I just love it. I don't know why I love that one so much. It's probably because Neil Young's not there. But I just love that album, and I bought a copy of it on CD, and I can't wait to get a copy of that. And I bought a CD before that, about 2 days before. What was that? Has that come yet? Can't remember. I can't remember. It might have been... I'm finding, if I've got the choice between vinyl and CD, I'm going to buy a CD, because the CDs are all like reasonably priced. You know, I can go and get that Crosby, Stills and Nash album. It costs about $5.99. If I buy on vinyl, it's like 40 quid. I just don't want that. I don't want that. And the other thing I have to say is, go around these record fairs, that there are certain albums that you can pick up for 5 quid. They're incredible. Anyone can go out and get a copy of, say, Going for the One by Yes. There's just hundreds of them, all for £5. That's an incredible album to buy. Or Relayer, that's another album you can get. But most of the time, you're finding an album and they're so overpriced. I don't care how much of the romance exists in a vinyl album. It's not worth the money. People are getting fleeced, and they've pushed it up because people are willing to buy it. So I suppose that's capitalism, that's the market value. But for me, I don't feel like that. I'm thinking it's not worth that much. Maybe it's because they're dealing with gentlemen of a certain age with a certain amount of free money in their pocket, perhaps. I don't know. I hope this ramble through this was interesting. I think I've done it nearly an hour on this nonsense. But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed, because I didn't know I was going to end up. I enjoyed the fact that I like CDs. I do like them. And I can't admit to it, can I? But I just have. CDs are the best. Are they?